The phone call came at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I was folding laundry in our bedroom when my cell rang with a number I didn't recognize. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Mrs. Anderson, this is Miguel Garcia from Bella Nut Restaurant. I need you to come in and see some security footage. It's very important. But please, come alone. Don't tell your husband. My blood ran cold. What kind of footage? My voice came out as a whisper. Miguel hesitated, then said quietly, the kind you need to see before you make any decisions. Please, Mrs. Anderson. I wouldn't call if it wasn't urgent. Can you come today? I looked at the laundry basket, at the pile of my husband David's shirts I'd been folding, and felt the world tilt sideways. I'll be there in an hour. Before we dive into what was on that footage, and trust me, what I saw changed my entire life. I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. Your support helps me bring you more incredible stories like this one. Now, let's go back to the beginning, because to understand why that phone call shattered my world, you need to know the whole story. My name is Alina Anderson, and until that phone call, I thought I had a good marriage. I was 36 years old, married to David Anderson for 12 years. Mother to two beautiful children, Emma, who was 10, and Lucas, who was 7. We lived in a comfortable 4-bedroom house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. I was a stay-at-home mom, a choice David and I had made together when Emma was born. He was a successful sales director at a pharmaceutical company, making enough money that we could live comfortably on one income. On paper, we were living the American dream. David and I had met in college at University of Oregon. I was studying elementary education and he was in business. We met at a party our junior year and there was instant chemistry. He was handsome, charismatic, funny, the kind of guy who could work a room and make everyone feel like they were his best friend. I was quieter, more reserved, drawn to his confidence and energy. We dated for 3 years, got married right after graduation when we were both 24, and started building our life together. The first few years were good. David got his job at the pharmaceutical company, and I taught 3rd grade at a local elementary school. We rented a small apartment, saved money, talked about our future and our dreams. When I got pregnant with Emma, we'd been married for 2 years and we were both excited. We decided I'd take maternity leave and then return to teaching. But after Emma was born, everything changed. I couldn't imagine leaving her with someone else. I wanted to be there for every moment, every milestone. David supported the decision to have me stay home, saying his salary was enough and my being with Emma was more important than the extra income. Those early years of motherhood were exhausting but fulfilling. Emma was an easy baby, happy and healthy. David was a good father when he was around, though his job required a lot of travel. He'd be gone 2 or 3 days a week, sometimes more during busy seasons, visiting clients and attending conferences. It was hard being alone with the baby so much, but I understood it was his job, that he was providing for our family. And when he was home, he was attentive and loving, playing with Emma, helping with bedtime, telling me I was doing a great job. When Emma was 3, I got pregnant with Lucas, another easy pregnancy, another healthy baby, and our family felt complete. David got promoted to sales director, which came with a substantial raise, but also more responsibility and more travel. By the time Lucas started kindergarten, David was gone 4 or 5 days most weeks, only home on weekends and sometimes not even then. I'd become essentially a single parent who happened to have a husband, managing everything from homework to doctor's appointments to household repairs by myself. I'd be lying if I said it didn't bother me. I missed having a partner, someone to share the daily challenges and triumphs with. I missed adult conversation and feeling like I was part of a team. But David always said he was doing it for us, that his travel was necessary to maintain his position and his salary, that he wished he could be home more, but this was the sacrifice we had to make. And I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because the alternative was too painful to consider. About 2 years ago, things started to feel different. David became more distant when he was home, checking his phone constantly, seeming distracted during family dinners. He'd snap at me over small things, criticize how I managed the household, point out when things weren't done to his standards. The sex life we'd maintained, despite the challenges, dwindled to almost nothing. When I'd try to talk to him about it, he'd say he was stressed from work, that I was being too sensitive, that every marriage went through phases like this. I tried to be understanding. I tried to be the perfect wife, keeping the house immaculate, making his favorite meals, looking nice even though I spent most of my days in yoga pants covered in playground dirt and craft supplies. I suggested we go to marriage counseling and he said we didn't need it, that I was overreacting to normal work stress. I suggested date nights and he said he was too tired when he was home. I suggested I could get a part-time job now that both kids were in school and he said we didn't need the money and it would just complicate our lives. So I stayed home and I took care of everything. And I pushed down the growing feeling that something was very wrong. I told myself every marriage had rough patches, that this was just a phase, that we'd get through it. I threw myself into the kids' activities, volunteered at their schools, kept myself busy so I wouldn't have time to think about how lonely I felt in my own marriage. Then, about 6 months ago, David started going to Bella Not. It was an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths and wine lists and prices that made me wince. He said he'd started taking clients there for business dinners, that it had become his go-to spot for important meetings. He'd come home smelling like expensive food and red wine, loosening his tie in the hallway, and tell me about the deals he'd closed over osso buco and tiramisu. I never questioned it because why would I? David had business dinners all the time. This was normal. He went to Bella Not at least once a week, sometimes twice, always for work, he said. Always meeting clients or potential clients or his boss. He'd text me from the restaurant sometimes, complaining about boring conversations or difficult clients, keeping me updated like a dutiful husband. I never suspected anything because he was so open about it, so casual. If he was hiding something, surely he wouldn't tell me exactly where he was, right? Last month, David told me his company was sending him to a big conference in San Diego. It was their annual sales summit. A week-long event where all the top performers would be recognized and strategy for the next year would be planned. He'd be gone Sunday through Saturday, he said, and he was excited because his team had performed well and he expected to be recognized. I helped him pack, made sure he had everything he needed, kissed him goodbye at the door Sunday morning while the kids were still asleep. That week was long and lonely, like his work trips always were. But I kept busy with the kids and their activities. David texted periodically, sending pictures of conference rooms and hotel ballrooms, complaining about boring presentations and networking events. Everything seemed normal. He came home Saturday evening, tired but satisfied, saying the conference had gone well and he'd gotten good feedback from his bosses. Life went back to normal, or what passed for normal in our household. Then came the phone call from Miguel Garcia at Bella Not. I stood in my bedroom holding the phone after he hung up, my hands shaking. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend the call had never happened, to continue in the comfortable delusion that my marriage was fine. But I knew I couldn't. Whatever was on that footage, I needed to see it. I needed to know the truth, even if the truth destroyed everything. I called my neighbor Susan and asked if she could pick up Emma and Lucas from school and keep them for a few hours. Susan, bless her, heard something in my voice and didn't ask questions. Just said of course, and she'd give them snacks and let them play in her backyard. Then I changed out of my yoga pants and into jeans and a sweater, pulled my hair into a ponytail, and drove downtown to Bella Not. The restaurant wasn't open yet for dinner service. I knocked on the locked glass door and a young man let me in. The dining room was dim, tables set for evening service, but empty and quiet. Miguel Garcia was waiting for me near the host stand. A man in his 50s with graying hair and kind eyes that looked at me with such sympathy I almost started crying right there. "Mrs. Anderson, thank you for coming. Please, follow me to the office." He led me through the dining room and down a hallway to a small office with a desk and a wall of security monitors. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. I sat, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Miguel sat at the desk and pulled up something on the computer. "I need to explain something first," he said. "I've been managing this restaurant for 20 years. I've seen a lot of things that are none of my business. Usually I keep to myself. What people do in my restaurant is between them and God. But what I'm about to show you, I couldn't stay silent about. Not when I saw you." "Saw me?" I said, confused. "I've never been here." Miguel nodded. "Exactly. In all the months your husband has been coming here, you've never been with him." And I started to realize why. "Mrs. Anderson, your husband has been coming to Bella Not twice a week for the past 6 months. He always makes reservations under his name, but he's never here for business dinners." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" Miguel turned the monitor so I could see it. "He comes here with a woman, the same woman every time. They sit in the Corner booth, the romantic one we usually reserve for anniversaries. They hold hands across the table. They kiss between courses. They look at each other the way people in love look at each other. And Mrs. Anderson. Last week, the week your husband told you he was in San Diego at a conference, he was here 3 times. With her, he clicked the mouse and security footage started playing. The angle was from above, showing the dining room. I could see the corner booth clearly. And there was David, my husband, David, sitting across from a woman I'd never seen before. She was younger than me, maybe early 30s, with long dark hair and a fitted red dress. She was beautiful. And David was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Miguel fast-forwarded through the footage. This is from 6 months ago. The first time they came in together, I watched David and the woman laugh over drinks, lean close to talk, his hand reaching across the table to hold hers. This is from 3 months ago. Now they were more comfortable, more intimate, sharing food off each other's plates. Her hand on his arm, his fingers playing with her hair. This is from 5 weeks ago. They were kissing over dessert. Not a quick peck, but a real kiss. The kind of kiss that speaks of familiarity and desire. And these, Miguel said quietly, are from last week. Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. The footage showed David and the woman arriving together, sitting in their usual booth, ordering wine. In one clip, she was showing him something on her phone, and they were both laughing. In another, they were holding hands and talking seriously about something. In the last one, from Friday night, David was kissing her hand, then her wrist, then leaning across the table to kiss her lips. I couldn't breathe. I literally couldn't get air into my lungs. My husband, the father of my children, the man I'd spent 12 years building a life with, was having an affair. Not just a one-time mistake, not just a drunken indiscretion, but a full-blown relationship complete with regular date nights at a romantic restaurant. While I was at home folding his laundry and making his meals and raising his children, he was wining and dining another woman in the same booth week after week. How long have you known? My voice came out strangled. Miguel looked uncomfortable. I suspected after the 3rd or 4th time they came in, the way they acted, it was clear this wasn't business. But I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. Then last Tuesday, when your husband told me he was treating his wife to a special dinner for your anniversary, I assumed this woman was you. I said something about how lucky you were that he'd remembered your anniversary. Miguel paused, his face pained. Mrs. Anderson, he didn't correct me. He let me think she was his wife. He smiled and said he tried to keep the romance alive. And she, the woman, she played along. She thanked me for the compliment. They toasted to their anniversary. And I served him our most expensive wine and our chef's special menu. And I felt sick doing it because I realized what was happening. Then yesterday, Sunday, you came in for lunch with your children. I stared at him. I hadn't been to Bella Not. What was he talking about? Miguel shook his head. I'm sorry, not you. Another woman, older, with 2 young children. She made a reservation under the name Anderson. When she arrived, I asked if her husband would be joining them, and she said no. Her son was traveling for work. She was David Anderson's mother. Mrs. Anderson, your mother-in-law. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. And you realized the woman he'd been calling his wife wasn't actually his wife? Miguel nodded. I asked your mother-in-law some casual questions about her son, about his family. She talked about you, about Emma and Lucas, showed me pictures on her phone. And the woman in those pictures was not the woman who'd been here every week pretending to be Mrs. Anderson. So I asked around, found out who you were, got your number from the reservation your mother-in-law had made, and I called you because I thought you deserved to know. I sat there staring at the paused security footage, at my husband's face, frozen in profile as he smiled at another woman. Who is she? I finally asked. Miguel pulled up another image, this one from a credit card receipt. Her name is Jessica Vaughn. The few times your husband paid with his personal card instead of his company card, it was when she paid half. Her name showed up on the split payment. I looked her up on social media. She works at the same pharmaceutical company as your husband. She's a marketing manager, of course. Of course she worked at his company. All those work trips, all that. Travel, all those late nights at the office. He wasn't actually at the office. He was with her. How many times had he texted me from a business dinner when he was actually on a date with Jessica? How many times had he complained about boring clients when he was really having intimate conversations with his mistress? Many times had I believed him, trusted him, while he was systematically lying to my face. I made copies of the footage, Miguel said, sliding a USB drive across the desk. Everything from the past 6 months, time-stamped and dated. I don't know what you're going to do with this information, Mrs. Anderson, but I wanted you to have evidence. Whatever you decide, you'll have proof of what's been happening. I took the USB drive with numb fingers. Why are you doing this? Why do you care? Miguel's eyes got sad. 25 years ago, I was your husband. I had an affair with a coworker. I told my wife I was working late. I took my mistress to nice restaurants in the next town where I thought nobody would see us. I lied every day for 2 years. And when my wife found out, not from me, but from a friend who saw us together, it destroyed her. The lying hurt her more than the cheating. She said if I'd just been honest, if I'd told her I was unhappy, maybe we could have fixed things or ended things honorably. But I took away her choice by lying. He leaned back in his chair. We divorced. I lost my family. My kids barely spoke to me for years. And I spent a long time trying to become a better person. I swore that if I ever saw someone else in that situation, someone being lied to the way I lied to my wife, I'd speak up. I wouldn't be complicit in someone else's deception. So that's why I called you. Because you deserve to know the truth. You deserve to make your own choices with accurate information. I stood up, clutching the USB drive. Thank you. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but thank you for telling me. Miguel stood too and walked me to the door. Mrs. Anderson, one more thing. When you confront him, because I assume you will, be prepared for him to deny everything. To say the footage is taken out of context, that Jessica is just a friend, that I'm lying for some reason. Men like your husband, like I was, we're very good at lying. We've had a lot of practice. Don't let him gaslight you. You know what you saw. Trust yourself. I drove home in a daze, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. I picked up the kids from Susan's house, thanking her and deflecting her concerned questions. I made dinner like I did every night, helped with homework, supervised bath time, read bedtime stories. I went through all the motions of being a normal mom on a normal Tuesday while my mind raced with what I'd seen and what it meant. David came home at 8, right on schedule. He kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, grabbed a beer from the fridge. He looked so normal, so familiar. This man I'd shared my life with for 12 years. How could he look so normal when he'd been living a double life? How could he ask about my day when he'd spend his afternoon or evening or whenever with another woman? How was work? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Busy, he said, loosening his tie. Had meetings all day, some difficult clients to deal with. I'm exhausted. Not unusual. He was always exhausted, always stressed. I'd accepted that as reality, never questioning if maybe there was another reason he was tired. Maybe spending time with a mistress was exhausting. Maybe living 2 lives took a toll. Did you have dinner? I asked. Yeah. Grabbed something at the office, he said, not meeting my eyes as he scrolled through his phone. A lie? Or maybe not. Maybe he really had grabbed something at the office today. But I knew now that many times when he'd said that, he'd actually been at Bella, not with Jessica. How many lies had I accepted without question over the months, over the years? I waited until he'd gone upstairs to shower before I pulled out my laptop. I inserted the USB drive and started going through the footage Miguel had given me. There were dozens of video files, each one time-stamped and dated. I watched my husband's affair unfold in silent security footage. Each dinner date, another stab to my heart. I saw them progress from slightly awkward initial dates to comfortable couple. Saw the intimacy build, saw him be romantic and attentive in ways he hadn't been with me in years. In one video, from 3 months ago, I watched David pull out a small wrapped box and hand it to Jessica. She opened it and squealed with delight, pulling out a delicate bracelet. She put it on immediately and reached across the table to kiss him. I recognized that bracelet. David had told me he'd bought it for his boss's wife as a thank you gift for helping him with some project. Another lie. The bracelet had been for his mistress. In another video. From 6 weeks ago, I watched them have what looked like a serious conversation. Jessica was crying and David was holding her hand, leaning close to talk to her. She shook her head, then nodded, then cried more. He came around to her side of the booth and held her, kissing her hair, rubbing her back. What were they discussing? Was she pressuring him to leave me? Was he promising her a future? Had they been planning my eventual replacement? The footage from last week, when David was supposedly in San Diego, was the worst. 3 separate dinner dates over 5 days: Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. On Tuesday, they were celebrating something, champagne and laughter. On Thursday, they looked tired but happy, holding hands across the table like an old married couple. On Friday, they were dressed up fancy, her in a cocktail dress and him in a suit I'd never seen before. They looked like they were going somewhere special after dinner. Some event I knew nothing about. I stayed up until 3 in the morning going through every piece of footage, taking screenshots, making notes of dates and times. I cross-referenced the dates with David's calendar, with his explanations for where he'd been. Almost every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months, he'd told me he had late meetings or client dinners or work obligations. And almost every Tuesday and Thursday, the security footage showed him at Bella Not with Jessica. By the time I finally closed my laptop, I had a complete timeline of my husband's affair. I knew when it had started, how often they met, how serious it had become, but I still didn't know what to do with this information. I could confront David immediately, throw the evidence in his face, demand explanations, but something told me to wait, to plan, to be strategic. If I confronted him now in an emotional state, he'd probably follow the playbook Miguel had warned me about: deny, minimize, gaslight, make me doubt what I'd seen. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with before I made any moves. So the next morning, after David left for work and the kids left for school, I started digging. I went through every credit card statement, every bank record, every receipt I could find. I found charges at hotels I'd never heard of on dates. David had supposedly been at business conferences. I found charges at jewelry stores and flower shops and expensive boutiques. I found thousands of dollars spent on a life I knew nothing about. I logged into David's email, something I'd never done before because I'd trusted him. His password was Emma's birthday, easy to guess. I found emails from Jessica dating back 8 months, even before the Bella Not dinners had started. Flirty messages at first, then more explicit, then fully romantic. She called him baby and sweetheart and my love. He called her his sunshine and his escape and his future. They had pet names for each other. They had inside jokes. They talked about their plans, about when he'd finally leave me, about the life they'd build together. In one email from 3 months ago, Jessica wrote, "I know it's hard right now, being patient, but we both agreed this is the right way to do it. You'll wait until after the holidays so you don't mess up Christmas for the kids. Then, in January, you'll sit Alina down and tell her the marriage is over. You'll file for divorce, ask for joint custody, and by spring we can finally be together openly. I love you and I believe in our future." David had responded, "You're right. We have to be smart about this. Alina will be devastated, but she'll recover. She's stronger than she seems. The kids will adjust. And then you and I can finally stop hiding. I can't wait to wake up with you every morning, to not have to sneak around, to build a real life together. I love you more than anything." I read that exchange sitting at my kitchen table. In the house David and I had bought together, surrounded by family photos and children's artwork and all the evidence of the life we'd built, and I felt something shift inside me. The heartbreak and betrayal were still there, crushing and overwhelming. But underneath that, a cold anger was growing. He'd made plans to leave me. He'd decided my future without giving me any say in it. He was going to wait until after Christmas, let me go through the holidays thinking everything was fine, and then destroy our family in January. Well, I decided he didn't get to control the timeline anymore. I was going to take control back, but I wasn't going to be rash about it. I was going to be smart, strategic, and I was going to make sure that when this all came out, I was in the strongest possible position. I called a divorce lawyer that afternoon, Rebecca Morrison, who came highly recommended by a friend who'd been through a messy divorce years ago. I made an appointment for the next day, telling David I had a doctor's appointment when he asked why I'd need a babysitter. Rebecca's office was in downtown Portland, sleek and professional. She was in her 50s, sharply dressed, with an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. I laid out everything for her, showed her the security footage, the credit card statements, the emails. She watched and read with an increasingly grim expression. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Mrs. Anderson, you have one of the most documented cases of infidelity I've ever seen. Your husband has been incredibly sloppy, which works in your favor." She explained my options. Oregon was a no-fault divorce state, which meant I didn't need to prove infidelity to get divorced. but the evidence would help with other aspects of the settlement, particularly regarding spousal support and the division of assets. She asked about our finances, and I explained that David made about $200,000 a year. We owned our home with about $300,000 in equity. We had retirement accounts and savings, and we had 2 children who would need support. Rebecca outlined a strategy. First, I needed to secure my own finances. I needed to open accounts in my own name, document all our assets, make sure I had copies of everything. Second, I needed to be prepared for David to fight dirty once he knew I was filing for divorce. Men who cheat often try to paint their wives as crazy or vindictive. I needed to keep detailed records of everything, remain calm and rational, and never give him ammunition to use against me. Third, I needed to think about what I wanted the end result to look like. Did I want primary custody of the kids? Did I want to stay in the house? Did I want spousal support? I knew exactly what I wanted. I wanted David out of my house. I wanted primary custody of Emma and Lucas, with him having standard visitation. I wanted child support and spousal support because I'd given up my career to raise our children, and I needed time to retrain and re-enter the workforce. I wanted my share of all assets, including his retirement accounts that had grown substantially during our marriage. And I wanted the truth to come out so everyone would know why our marriage ended. Over the next week, I opened a checking account at a different bank in my name only and transferred half of our savings into it. I made copies of every financial document, every tax return, every statement. I documented our daily life, Emma and Lucas's schedules, how I managed everything from school activities to doctor's appointments to household maintenance. I took screenshots of David's location history from the family tracking app we used, showing all the times he'd been places he hadn't told me about. I backed up the emails and the security footage in 3 different places. And every day, I played the role of normal wife. I made dinner. I asked about his day. I maintained the household. I acted like nothing had changed. It was the hardest performance of my life. Looking at David across the dinner table, listening to him tell stories about work that I now knew were probably lies. Smiling when he kissed me goodbye, all while knowing what I knew. It took every ounce of strength I had. David noticed nothing. He was so confident in his deception. So sure, I was the oblivious housewife he'd left behind while he built a new life, that he didn't see the change in me. Or maybe he just didn't look closely enough anymore. Maybe I'd become so much a part of the furniture of his life that he didn't really see me as a person anymore, just as the mother of his children and the keeper of his house. On Friday, 1 week after Miguel's phone call, I put my plan into action. I'd arranged for Emma and Lucas to spend the weekend at my sister's house, telling them it was a special aunt-niece nephew weekend. They were excited and packed their own bags. David would be home that evening and we'd have the house to ourselves. I told him I'd planned a special date night at home, that I wanted to reconnect as a couple. He seemed surprised but pleased, probably thinking I was finally done being distant and cold, probably thinking his dutiful wife was back to normal. I made his favorite dinner, set the table with candles, put on a dress and makeup. I acted like the devoted wife he expected, serving him wine and asking about his week. He relaxed, smiled, complimented the meal. We ate and talked, or rather he talked and I listened, just like always. He told me about a difficult client and a frustrating meeting, never mentioning that he'd also had dinner at Bella, not with Jessica, on Tuesday. After dinner, I suggested we watch a movie in the living room. I poured him more wine, and I put on a random movie, something action-filled that he liked. Halfway through, I paused it and said, "Actually, I wanted to show you something else, a different kind of video." David looked confused but intrigued. I pulled up my laptop and turned it so he could see the screen. Then I hit play on the security footage from Bellinot. I watched David's face as he realized what he was seeing. He went pale, then red, then pale again. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The footage showed him and Jessica at their corner booth, holding hands, kissing over dessert. It was from 2 weeks ago, time-stamped and dated clearly on the screen. When it finished, I played another one from a month ago, then another from 6 weeks ago. I let him watch himself betray me over and over again in silent security footage. Finally, he found his voice. "Alina, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like." I held up my hand to stop him. Don't insult me by pretending this is anything other than what it is. I know everything, David. I know about Jessica Vaughn. I know you've been seeing her for at least 8 months. I know you've been taking her to Bella not twice a week for 6 months. I know about the hotels and the gifts and the emails where you plan to leave me in January after you ruined Christmas for our children. His face went through several expressions. Shock, giving way to panic, giving way to defensive anger. You went through my private emails. How dare you invade my privacy like that? I laughed, a harsh sound without humor. I invaded your privacy. You've been having an affair for 8 months and you're concerned about your privacy? Do you hear yourself? He stood up, pacing, running his hands through his hair. Okay, yes. I've been seeing someone, but you have to understand, Alina, our marriage has been dead for years. We're like roommates, not husband and wife. I was lonely and she made me feel alive again. So your solution to feeling lonely was to have an affair instead of talking to me about it. Instead of suggesting counseling or, I don't know, actually leaving before you started sleeping with someone else. My voice was rising despite my efforts to stay calm. David turned on me, his expression hardening. What was I supposed to do? You're so wrapped up in the kids and the house, you don't even see me anymore. When was the last time you dressed up for me? When was the last time you seemed interested in anything I had to say? You became boring, Alina. You became a mother and stopped being a woman. The words hit like physical blows. This was what he really thought of me. That I was boring. That I'd stopped being a woman because I'd dedicated my life to raising our children and maintaining our home. That I deserved to be cheated on because I wasn't exciting enough anymore. Get out, I said quietly. What? He looked genuinely confused. Get out of this house now tonight. Pack a bag and leave. He laughed, a condescending sound. This is my house too, Alina. I paid for it. I pay the mortgage. You don't get to kick me out just because you're upset. I stood up, pulling out my phone. Would you like me to call the police and show them the evidence of your affair? Or would you like to leave voluntarily? Because Rebecca Morrison, my divorce lawyer, has already prepared a restraining order if necessary. All I have to do is call her and it goes into effect. So you can leave now with some dignity, or you can leave in the back of a police car. Your choice. His face cycled through emotions. Disbelief, rage, fear, calculation. You hired a lawyer. When last week, right after I saw this footage, did you really think I'd just sit here and take this? Did you think I'd be the good little wife who looks the other way while you destroy our family? I crossed my arms. You have 10 minutes to pack a bag. After that, I'm calling 911. David stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he'd only ever seen the version of me he wanted to see. The compliant wife who made his life comfortable and didn't ask difficult questions. He'd never seen the woman who'd put herself through college working 3 jobs, who'd managed a classroom of 30, who'd run an entire household and raised 2 children essentially alone. He'd mistaken quiet strength for weakness, patience for stupidity. Where am I supposed to go? He finally asked, his voice smaller now, less certain. I don't care. Go to Jessica's. I'm sure she'll be thrilled to have you full-time instead of just for dinner dates. Go to a hotel. Sleep in your car. I really don't care, David. But you're not sleeping in this house tonight or any night going forward. I gestured toward the stairs. 9 minutes now. He went upstairs and I heard him banging around in our bedroom, throwing things into a bag. I stayed in the living room, shaking but standing firm. This was happening. I was really doing this. After 12 years of marriage, after 2 children, after building an entire life together, I was ending it tonight. Part of me wanted to cry, wanted to beg him to stay and fix this. Wanted to go back to this morning when I could still pretend everything was fine. But I pushed that feeling down. I deserved better than this. My children deserved better than growing up watching their mother accept being treated this way. David came back downstairs with a duffel bag and his briefcase. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked at me. For a moment, I thought he might apologize, might show some remorse for what he'd done. Instead, he said, "You're making a huge mistake. Alina, you're throwing away our family over a relationship that didn't even mean anything. Jessica was just a distraction, a way to deal with stress. You're the one I married. You're the mother of my children. If you'd just calm down, we could work through this." I stared at him in disbelief. A distraction. You've been planning to leave me for her. I read the emails. David, I know you two were going to wait until January to blow up our lives. Don't stand there and minimize this now that you've been caught. He set down his bag, trying a different approach. Those emails were just fantasy. I never would have actually left. I love our family. I love what we've built. Elena, please, don't do this. Think about Emma and Lucas. Think about what this will do to them. Don't you dare use our children as an excuse, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You didn't think about them when you were kissing Jessica at Bellinot. You didn't think about them when you were spending our family's money on hotels and gifts for your mistress. You didn't think about them when you were planning to leave me in 2 months. You only care about them now because you're facing consequences for your actions. I pointed at the door. Get out, now. David's expression hardened. Fine, but you're going to regret this, Alina. I'll fight you on everything. Custody, money, the house, all of it. I have the best lawyers money can buy, and you're just a housewife who hasn't worked in a decade. You think you're going to come out of this okay? You're delusional. He grabbed his bag and walked to the door. I'll be back for more of my things. And I'll be calling my lawyer first thing Monday morning. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. The door slammed behind him and I heard his car start and pull out of the driveway. Then I was alone in my house, in the sudden silence, and I collapsed onto the couch and cried. I cried for the marriage I'd thought I had. I cried for the man I'd thought David was. I cried for my children who were about to have their world turned upside down. I cried for myself, for all the years I'd given to someone who valued me so little. I cried until I had no tears left, and then I just sat there in the dark, exhausted and hollow. But by morning, the grief had transformed into something else. Determination. David had threatened to fight me on everything. Thinking I'd be intimidated, thinking I'd back down. He'd called me just a housewife like that meant I was weak or stupid. He had no idea what he was up against. Saturday morning, I called Rebecca Morrison on her emergency line. I told her David was out of the house and about his threats to fight me on everything. She said that was actually good news, that him leaving voluntarily made things easier, and that his threats were empty bluster. We had too much evidence. His affair was documented in exhaustive detail. His financial infidelity was clear in bank records. His absence from family life was evident in every school form and medical record that had only my signature. Rebecca said to expect David to play dirty, though. Men like him, when cornered, would often try to paint their wives as unstable or vengeful. He might claim I was keeping the children from him or that I was mentally unwell. He might try to hide assets or reduce his income artificially. We needed to be ready for all of it. She'd file the divorce papers Monday morning, asking for temporary sole custody, child support, spousal support, and exclusive use of the marital home. Oregon law was generally favorable to primary caregivers in custody disputes, and I had been the primary caregiver for 10 years. David's extensive travel and work schedule would work against him. But what about the affair? I asked. You said Oregon is no fault. Does the cheating even matter legally? Rebecca explained that while Oregon didn't require proof of fault to grant a divorce, the affair could be relevant in other ways. If David had spent significant marital assets on the affair, I could argue for a larger share of remaining assets to compensate. If he'd neglected his family obligations in favor of the affair, it strengthened my case for primary custody. And if he tried to paint me as vindictive or unreasonable, the documented affair would show I had legitimate reasons for my actions. There's something else you should consider, Rebecca said. Your husband works in pharmaceuticals. Many companies in that industry have morality clauses in their employment contracts, especially for senior positions. If his employer found out he's been having an affair with a subordinate or colleague, using company resources to facilitate the relationship, taking personal trips and charging them as business expenses, he could face disciplinary action or even termination. I'm not saying you should necessarily pursue that angle, but it's leverage if we need it. The idea of going after David's job felt too vindictive at first, but then I thought about all the lies he'd told, all the times he'd claimed to be working when he was really with Jessica. If he'd been misusing company resources, that wasn't my fault. That was his choice. And if there were consequences, he'd brought them on himself. I told Rebecca to keep that option in reserve. We'd use it if David made things ugly, which I suspected he would. I spent the rest of the weekend preparing to tell Emma and Lucas. This was the part I'd been dreading most. How do you explain to a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old that their father had broken their family? How do you help them understand without making them hate their dad? Because despite everything, he was still their father and they loved him. My sister Carla helped me find the right words. She came over Sunday afternoon and we talked through different approaches. Different ways to be honest without being cruel. To acknowledge their feelings without drowning them in adult problems. Monday morning, Rebecca filed the divorce papers. By noon, David had been served at his office. He called me 20 times in an hour. I didn't answer. He sent text after text, ranging from angry to pleading to threatening. I screenshot every single one and forwarded them to Rebecca. Finally, he showed up at the house Monday evening, pounding on the door. I didn't let him in. I spoke to him through the doorbell camera. The lawyers will handle everything from now on. David, don't come to this house again without prior arrangement. I mean it. I want to see my kids. He shouted at the camera. You can't keep me from my own children. I'm not keeping you from them, I said calmly. But we need to establish a formal visitation schedule through the lawyers. You can't just show up whenever you want anymore. He called me every name he could think of, his face red with rage, before finally leaving. I saved that footage too. Everything was evidence now. Everything was documentation of who he really was when the mask came off. Tuesday evening, I sat down with Emma and Lucas. I'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times in my head, but it was still the hardest thing I'd ever done. I told them that Daddy and I were going to get divorced, that we both loved them very much, but we couldn't be married to each other anymore. Emma, who was smart and perceptive, immediately asked why. I told her that sometimes adults make mistakes and hurt each other, and that Daddy had made some choices that broke our trust. I didn't give details, but I was honest that this wasn't a mutual decision, that Daddy had done something that hurt our family. Lucas cried. Emma got angry, demanding to know exactly what their father had done. I told her it was adult stuff that she didn't need to worry about, that the important thing was that both Daddy and I would always be their parents and would always love them. Emma wasn't satisfied with that answer, but she could see I wasn't going to say more. Over the next few days, both kids had lots of questions, lots of emotions. They were angry at me for making Daddy leave. They were sad that our family was breaking up. They were confused about what would happen next. David didn't make it easier. He called them every night, crying and telling them how much he missed them, how unfair I was being, how he couldn't wait until they could all be together again. He was weaponizing their emotions, making them feel guilty for being with me, making me the villain. I bit my tongue and let them talk to their father, documenting every inappropriate thing he said, every time he tried to manipulate them against me. Rebecca said it would all be relevant in the custody hearing. About 2 weeks after I'd kicked David out, I got an interesting phone call. It was from a woman named Patricia Santos, Director of Human Resources at David's pharmaceutical company. She asked if I had time to meet with her, saying it was regarding some concerns that had come to her attention about David's expense reports and workplace conduct. I agreed to meet her that afternoon, curious about what this meant. Patricia's office was in the sleek downtown headquarters of Meridian Pharmaceuticals. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, professional and direct. She explained that the company had received an anonymous tip about David, potentially falsifying expense reports and having an inappropriate relationship with a colleague. She'd been tasked with investigating and wanted to speak with me as part of that process. I wasn't under any obligation to talk to her, she made clear, but anything I could share would be helpful. I thought about it for maybe 5 seconds before pulling out my phone and showing her everything. The security footage from Bella, not the credit card statements showing personal charges on his corporate card, the emails documenting his relationship with Jessica Vaughn. Patricia's eyes got wider and wider as she reviewed the evidence. This is extensive, she said finally, and I appreciate you sharing it. I have to ask, do you know if Ms. Vaughn reports to your husband in any capacity? I pulled up Jessica's profile on the company website, something I'd looked at obsessively in the days after discovering the affair. She's a marketing manager. David is a sales director. I don't know if there's a direct reporting line, but they're definitely in related departments. Patricia made notes, and you said some of these charges are from dates when he claimed to be on business trips. I showed her the credit card statements next to David's work calendar I'd photographed before he'd left. These hotel charges in Seattle were during a regional sales conference that apparently didn't exist. These charges in San Francisco were during a client emergency that required overnight travel. But according to the security footage, he was actually in Portland at Bella, not with Jessica. Patricia thanked me and said the company would be conducting a full investigation. She couldn't tell me what the outcome would be, but she assured me they took allegations of expense fraud and inappropriate workplace relationships seriously, especially at the director level. I left her office feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. I hadn't gone after David's job maliciously, but when his own company had come asking questions, I had simply told the truth. Whatever happened next was a result of his own actions, not mine. 3 days later, David called me in a panic. What did you do? What did you tell my company? His voice was high and stressed. I got suspended pending investigation. They're accusing me of fraud and misconduct. This is your fault, Alina. You're trying to destroy my career. I stayed calm. I didn't contact your company, David. They contacted me as part of an investigation someone else initiated. And I told them the truth. If the truth is destroying your career, that's on you, not me. You showed them the videos, he said accusingly. You showed them the footage from the restaurant and my credit card statements. You're vindictive and you're trying to ruin my life. I laughed without humor. I'm vindictive. You had an affair for 8 months and planned to abandon your family, but I'm the vindictive one for documenting the truth. David, you falsified expense reports. You used company money to fund your affair. You lied to your employer. Those are fireable offenses. I didn't do that to you. You did it to yourself. He hung up on me. 2 weeks later, Meridian Pharmaceuticals terminated David's employment for gross misconduct. The investigation had found systematic expense fraud, misuse of company resources, and an inappropriate relationship with a colleague that violated company policy. Jessica Vaughn was also fired. David tried to sue the company for wrongful termination, but his lawyer told him he had no case, given the documented evidence. He ended up having to pay back over $30,000 in fraudulent expenses or face criminal charges. Suddenly, David's threats to fight me with the best lawyers money can buy rang hollow. He was unemployed, facing significant debt, and his reputation in the pharmaceutical industry was destroyed. Meanwhile, I had documented everything, had an excellent lawyer, and had the moral high ground. The divorce proceedings went heavily in my favor. I got primary custody of Emma and Lucas, with David having supervised visitation until he could demonstrate stable housing and employment. I got the house, the majority of our savings, and substantial spousal and child support. The judge was not sympathetic to David's arguments, especially after reviewing the evidence of his affair and financial misconduct. So when people ask me if I'm glad Miguel called, if I'm grateful for that security footage, I say yes, without hesitation. Because knowledge is power, even when that knowledge hurts. Truth is freedom, even when that truth is devastating. And sometimes the kindest thing someone can do for you is show you reality, no matter how painful that reality might be. That's my story. The story of how a phone call from a restaurant manager changed my entire life. The story of how security footage revealed a betrayal I never saw coming. The story of how I went from being a passive victim of someone else's choices to being an active agent in my own life. It's not a fairy tale ending. There's no perfect resolution where everyone lives happily ever after. But it's a real ending, an honest ending. And that's worth something. If you're watching this and you're in a similar situation, if you've discovered betrayal, or if you're living with that uncomfortable feeling that something is wrong in your relationship, I want you to know this. You are strong enough to face the truth. You are worthy of honesty and respect. You deserve a partner who values you, who keeps their promises, who treats your marriage like the sacred commitment it is. And if you're not getting that, if you're settling for less because you're scared or comfortable or invested, please know that there's a better life waiting for you on the other side of that truth. It won't be easy. Facing reality, leaving a bad situation, rebuilding your life, none of that is easy, but it's possible. And it's worth it, because living in truth, even painful truth, is better than living in comfortable lies. I know because I've done both, and I would choose truth every single time. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here, for being part of this community where we share our experiences and support each other through difficult times. Drop a comment and let me know what you think. Did I do the right thing confronting David that night? Should I have tried to work things out for the kids' sake? Or was ending the marriage the best choice for everyone involved? I want to hear your thoughts, your opinions, your own experiences with betrayal and truth and difficult choices. And if this story resonated with you, if it helped you in any way or made you think differently about a situation in your own life, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future stories of survival, strength, and finding yourself after betrayal. I'm looking forward to reading your comments and connecting with you all. On the screen, you can see 2 more powerful stories I think you'll love. There's so much more content on this channel, so many stories of people who faced impossible situations and found their way through to the other side. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Until next time, remember this. You deserve honesty. You deserve respect. You deserve a life built on truth, not comfortable lies. Trust your instincts. Ask the hard questions. And if someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Take care of yourselves. Be brave. And know that whatever you're facing, you're not alone. With love and respect, I'll see you in the next one.